And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our panel. Dr. Hong is a surgical oncologist at MD Anderson at Cooper. He leads the TIL team and is the principal investigator of several ongoing TIL studies. Dr. Hong brings unique experience in this treatment from his prior investigational work with TIL therapy at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Hong, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, well, thanks everyone and spending your evening with us. And I think that, hopefully this webinar is very helpful for everyone. I'm at MD Anderson at Cooper. I'm a surgical oncologist and hepatobiliary surgeon. So I do a lot of GI, liver, pancreas surgery, as well as HIPEC surgery. But my passion, kind of combines with immunotherapy and run the TIL therapy after learning about TIL therapy at the NCI. And so a lot of the innovations that we have ongoing at Cooper has to deal with how to elicit an immune response that we've witnessed from miracles in melanoma and how to apply that to other cancers. So we have a lot of innovative strategies to stimulate the body's immune system, most recently being the non-invasive ultrasound histotripsy to really prime the lesions that have gone to the liver. So a lot of exciting things, and hopefully explore a lot more about TIL therapy tonight.
Great, thank you. And today is a very special webinar because we also get to have on the panel Jamie Goldfarb, a stage 4 melanoma patient, survivor. She happens to be a patient of yours, Dr. Hong, which is just so exciting. We'll get to hear a little bit about the relationship. Jamie is also one of MRA's community leaders for our Melanoma Exchange online community, and she also happens to understand trial recruitment very well. So welcome, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Dana and Dr. Hong. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As Dana said, I'm a stage 4 melanoma survivor because I did a clinical trial for TIL at NCI in 2011. Dr. Hong was one of my research fellows at that time who administered the trial for me, and now we remain with our relationship 15 years later because of that. So thank you very much.
We are so lucky to have you both. Thank you. And before we go much further, I want to make sure to add a special thank you to our MRA team, Renee Orsioni, Associate Director of Communications and Engagement, and Yasmin Idrisi, our digital media intern. Thank you both for the support. This webinar would not be possible without you. Now, I'm really excited to get started. And before we dive deeper into TIL therapy and the TILVANCE-301 trial specifically, let's discuss clinical trials in general for a bit and what role clinical trials can play in a melanoma journey and why they are important. Dr. Hong, do you want to tackle that first part there? And then maybe we'll look to Jamie to see why she was interested in pursuing a clinical trial.
Sure. So I think clinical trial is vital and the backbone of medical advancement. And, a lot of times I get this phrase a lot as being treated as a guinea pig. And I think that's a very bad way to look at clinical trial. Clinical trial offers someone the potential newest and greatest treatment, and you're the first to receive this treatment. And it may take years for this to be FDA approved and get to the patients in a broader population. So you have an opportunity to get this life-saving treatment very first, early in the treatment process. There's multiple phases of any treatment that you bring on from lab work to murine models or mouse models to humans. So, it's a big deal to take something you learn from the benchtop and to actually apply them in humans. So there are different phases. So phase one, it just kind of shows safety profile, meaning that when we take something from the lab and give it to a human, can we safely administer this? And that's a phase one trial. So it's a small cohort of patients to demonstrate that, yes, this is safe to administer in patients. Phase two is really more for the efficacy of a dedicated cohort to see the efficacious nature of the treatment that you're bringing. Phase three is when you do a randomized trial to really put head to head to what the current standard is to try to really prove that this treatment is equally good or even better than the current standard. And that's really the ultimate test of a clinical trial. And I would argue that the patients that sign up for clinical trial, I think that there's some certain unique feature about patients who enroll. They're always altruistic. I know that they want to try clinical trial for themselves, but every single patient have all stated to me, I know that it may or may not help me, but I know that it's going to help someone else in the future. And that to me as a investigator is like the most touching testimony of humanity, of patients caring for other patients. And that altruistic mindset is really humbling to see every time I see a patient that signed up for a clinical trial, and really takes a lot of courage. And it also equally takes a lot of humility and honesty of the investigator to make sure that you really go on a journey with the patient in a clinical trial.
Thank you. That's beautiful, and it's such a good takeaway. Jamie, what inspired you to pursue clinical trial possibilities? Oh, we can't hear you.
Excuse me, apologies. For me, when I was diagnosed in 2011, there were only 2 approved treatments for melanoma. One was high-dose interleukin-2, which had about a 5% response rate, and one was chemotherapy, which we know late-stage melanoma does not respond to, but it's on the books as a treatment. And so I also had the pleasure of working in clinical trial patient recruitment at the time that I was diagnosed. So I had more information about clinical trials than the average patient would. So for me, it wasn't, should I join a clinical trial? For me, it was, which clinical trial should I join? So after I was diagnosed, it was a 2-week, really fast, really focused effort on getting as many opinions as possible from all of the key opinion leaders located throughout the country in melanoma. They were all doing different research at the time. It was a landscape where research was moving very quickly. And so my best choice of the best care option was through a clinical trial. And so that's why I decided to join a clinical trial. But I think for patients, the most important thing to understand is that a clinical trial should be seen as care options. They should not be seen as last-ditch efforts. When you are deciding on what your treatment is going to be from the very first point of diagnosis, it's very important to consider clinical trials as one of your treatment options, because the research landscape in oncology, and in melanoma specifically, is very, very fast. And so for a patient, joining a clinical trial can represent your best chance at getting the most cutting edge treatment available, not a last ditch effort.
Thank you. All great points. I'm going to stick with you for a minute, though. And can you share some of the questions that you asked of your provider team when it came to starting to parse some of this information?
Yes, absolutely. So for me, the question was because melanoma does not respond to chemotherapy. So it was, for me, I need to do immunotherapy. But at the time, all the immunotherapies were still in research. They were not yet approved. This was only 2011, right? So ipilimumab was still in trials. BRAF was still in trials. BRAF plus MEK was still in trials. Anti-PD-1s weren't even in trials yet. They weren't even part of the conversation. So for me, it was, I need to figure out what my treatment path is going to be in a way that doesn't exclude me from future treatment. So I very much needed to understand, what is the research you're conducting? What is the propensity for the side effects? And what impact does that have on my future treatments? Like for example, I was considering ipilimumab, I was considering BRAF because my tumor is BRAF positive. I was considering BRAF plus MUC, and TIL. And what I needed to learn from everybody was, what are the long-term side effects? What happens to preclude me from additional research? And everything that I researched and found out from all the doctors was, everyone unanimously agreed that if I were eligible for TIL, I should do TIL first, and that everything else should follow from that based on the side effects.
That's great. It's nice that you had that unanimous decision, because I know sometimes patients are receiving, very different information from different subsets of, a specialty. So it's great that you had that. Okay, that's a great setup, and you guys both made it very easy to understand sort of the landscape of clinical trials. So now let's take a little bit of a more detailed look at TIL therapy and the TILVANCE-301 trial, since it's such a great example of of getting into a trial that could really change the trajectory of your disease. So I first want to ask you, Dr. Hong, TIL therapy is one of the newest, most promising therapeutic options in melanoma and even other solid tumors, which is so exciting. TIL therapy is an FDA-approved treatment for patients with advanced melanoma. What questions is the TILVANCE-301 trial now seeking to answer?
Sure. So if I can step back and just kind of describe what the current melanoma strategy with
Sure.
immunotherapy. So the way I like to describe immunotherapy to patients is a simple car, right? So a car has a gas pedal and a brake. And if you think of the immunotherapy as a car, pushing on the gas pedal is the same thing as giving IL-2 alone, which is like a growth factor for the immune system. Checkpoint inhibitor that we have, which is a Keytruda, Pembro, and all those ipilimumab, they are essentially cutting the brake line of a brake pad in your car. So the car can't brake and just boost all the immune system. It is non-specific. It's off the shelf. So it's an antibody infusion you get and just kind of allows all immune cells to be cut the brake lines. And so some of it may respond to the cancer, some of it will not. And so there's a lot of broad, non-specific stimulation. TIL therapy is very unique and I would argue is the most personalized treatment you can get under the planet. And the way I say that, why I say that is because a patient's TIL treatment, what that is tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes. So inside a patient's melanoma, you have your own immune cells that is specifically attacking your melanoma. And when we cut out that tumor and harvest the immune cells, there's actually less than 1% shared antigens or the target that your TIL immune cells have with another patient's. Meaning that if I took your TIL cells, I can't give it to anyone else on this planet because it won't work. It will only work to the host that donated the tumor. So that is the most personalized immune therapy you have. And so TILVANCE-301 stemmed from early data that shows that in the previous IOV-CON 202 study, there was a small cohort of patients that were eligible for TIL as a first-line treatment. And what we have noticed was that there was a marked higher objective response rate and complete response rate of 60% response of objective response and 30% complete response cures. And that is notably much higher than the current TIL as a second, third, fourth line treatment, which historically was 30% response rate. So by that small cohort, understanding that if you give TIL therapy early on, before a patient gets any other treatment and not using as the last line, we notice a markedly higher batting average. And that phenomenon stems from the concept of T cell exhaustion. Your immune cell could get exhausted. You keep flogging with different treatments, and then you come to TIL and you try to get that T cells to now revive and try to do a big work. Your T cells are kind of tired. And so the concept of isolating the TIL cells up front is the concept of TILVANCE-301. And so this is a phase 3 study. So if you recall, phase 3 is a randomized study comparing to pembrolizumab, which is the current standard, which is the off-the-shelf, non-specific PD-L1 inhibitor. And TILVANCE, the treatment arm, the study arm is the TIL therapy plus Pembro. So we're not replacing the standard, we're actually adding to the standard treatment, the TIL therapy. And so what we hope to achieve is that through the study is to justify that TIL therapy should be a first-line treatment rather than an approved second and third, fourth-line treatment, which is currently FDA approved for. And I have to say that I have treated patients on that IOV-CON 202 study with a patient treatment-naive, and they have had a complete response. I then had the first TILVANCE-301 patient enrolled, and she also is a complete responder already. And then the second patient is already a partial responder and responding as every month goes by. So I have to say that while the study is early, even in my own hands, I've actually seen a dramatic higher response rate in the TIL as a first-line therapy. So what we hope to do is by enrolling 670 some patients to prove to the FDA that TIL is a superior product as a first-line treatment option, given what we are seeing right now in the clinic.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about who this is intended for specifically?
Sure. So the inclusion criteria for this is right now for patients with stage 4 metastatic melanoma or those that have stage 3 localized unresectable melanoma. So that includes stage 3 patients that have unresectable disease, and they also qualify. So it's for cutaneous melanoma and not for uveal or ocular melanoma. They're just a little bit of a different variant that somehow doesn't respond in ocular and uveal yet. I know that Uday Kamula, who was also a former faculty at the NCI, has demonstrated a first patient that had responded to TIL from ocular melanoma from his lab. So I know that there's a signal there, and that's very exciting to see that Dr. Kamula, who spent over 2 decades working on this, is continuing to improve upon. But for this trial, it's for cutaneous melanoma, unresectable stage 3 and stage 4, and those who have not had a prior checkpoint or BRAF inhibitor greater than 6 months, because now immunotherapy is given so often. So patients who had a surgery for melanoma that's localized often sometimes get adjuvant immunotherapy, which means just preventative immunotherapy. And if that's the case, you can still be eligible for the trial if there is no signs of progression from 6 months from your last treatment. So you can still enroll for this trial if it was greater than 6 months, just to kind of make the data a little bit cleaner for analysis. I think a lot of the typical exclusion patients are patients that can't really tolerate immunotherapy, those that have autoimmune toxicity, allergy to some of the reagents that are given in the treatment. But historically, patients that are even on small dose steroids for, let's say, adrenal insufficiency can still qualify for TIL if it's less than 10 milligrams of prednisone per day. So there is a wiggle room for steroid dependence as well.
That's great. Sounds like quite a wide catchment of patients, which is great. Jamie, maybe you can tell us, I mean, you already told us why you were interested in clinical trials, but what made you consider this as a frontline opportunity for yourself versus the standard of care?
Yeah, so when I was diagnosed, as I said, there were only 2 treatments available that were approved. And so I needed to consider clinical trials as a care option. The reason why I did TIL as a frontline care option. I mean, so at the time that I was diagnosed, I had just given birth to our son. He was a newborn. It was the day before I was supposed to return to work from a maternity leave. My diagnosing physician said he would do everything in his power to buy me 6 more months with the baby. But for me, that wasn't good enough, right? Like I didn't want to just be here for 6 months. I wanted to be here for his entire life. He, by the way, is 14 now, so that's very exciting. But yeah, so my decision was all about what was going to give me the best chance of overall survival, right? I didn't want to have better quality of life. I didn't want to live just a few more months. I wanted to be cured of my melanoma and continue about my life as normal, having just made this promise to this human being that I brought into the world to be there for him. And so as I was doing my research on the clinical trials, I was looking at the efficacy and response rates of all the different things that were in research and what I thought that I would want to do in what order. And I really wanted to do TIL first because it had the best published response rates. At the time I did NCI TIL, they have published response rates up to 70%. The next best thing in trials was showing response rates up to 20%. So I really wanted to do the thing that I thought was going to give me the best possible chance at long-term survival. Also, felt like I was at my very best in as a patient at that time, where I wasn't feeling a lot of side effects from the cancer itself. I felt very healthy. I felt like I could do anything. And so I wanted to do a very hard-hitting treatment at that time, right away when I felt my best. And so everyone was kind of telling me, well, TIL is the best treatment, but it's kind of hard to go through, and so this is what you need to do. And so I decided on TIL as first line therapy because not only was it showing the best response rate, it was the hardest hitting. And I also was in a very fortuitous life situation at the time because I was local to the National Cancer Institute. So I was able to consult with them in different ways. And so everyone all of the key opinion leaders that I was talking to at the time to learn all about the different research, which was like at Mass General, at University of Pennsylvania, at Sloan Kettering, all the different places where I sought opinions. Everyone decided for me unanimously, do TIL. If you're accepted into TIL, do TIL now because you're a prime candidate for that treatment. You're going to do it right now. It's the heaviest hitting. We have lots of options if it doesn't work. So try that first. And so I went, because of all the information gathering that I did, because of the proactiveness that I was able to take, because of the empowered position I was already in as somebody who worked in the clinical trial industry, I was able to very quickly get into contact with these key opinion leaders and for them to give me their opinions. And when everyone unanimously decided, even though we had already decided that I wanted to do TIL based on the efficacy rates and everybody that I had talked to at the National Cancer Institute, having everyone else kind of that I was also in consult with, all of the other key opinion leaders, verify or validate that decision, was very critical for me as well, from an emotional standpoint, not necessarily from a physical, how I'm going to respond to the treatment, but from an emotional standpoint of how I was going to attack the treatment as a person, made a huge difference for me. And I did TIL as newly diagnosed first line treatment. And when I did it at NCI, I did it it was a phase 1 trial. So it was also, the point of the trial was safety and dosing. And it was very clear to me from my doctors at NCI I might not see a benefit, or I might. But what I glommed onto as someone who was just told, I will do everything I can in my power to buy you 6 months with your baby, was it might work. Right. So that is very much what influenced my decision. Like, as much as I want all melanoma patients now and in the future to benefit from all of the knowledge that has come with the differing clinical trials and the research that we're doing in melanoma, and as much as I wanted to be a part of it for altruistic reasons, my core concern was, how am I going to survive so that I can be here for my child when he needs me? And that is what led me to enroll in the TIL trial as first-line treatment.
Thank you. How would you counsel other newly diagnosed melanoma patients? What would you say to them? Because sometimes it's just information overload. You're in the throes of wild anxiety. You don't know if you're going to be here next week or next year. You're asked to make decisions really quickly. So how would you help them manage that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the best advice that I can give to newly diagnosed patients is to have the understanding that you need to be your own best advocate. You need to do your research. You need to find out what the treatment options are, because your doctor may or may not be telling you about all of the clinical trials, and that is not a positive or negative statement about your current physician. That's just the nature of how medicine works in our world. There are so many. The research landscape is changing so quickly that you have to, as a patient, understand that there's a responsibility there to be tapped into what is going on. How do I figure out what all my options are? Clinical trials for people with cancer and other potentially fatal illnesses, are a care option. They are not a last-ditch effort. They are a something that you need to be considering from your very first conversation with what is my treatment pathway going to be? What is next steps? What are first steps? It's not just what is approved and available for my doctor to prescribe to me right now. It is, what is available out there in the entire universe of brilliant minds who are working every single day tirelessly to try to cure my condition? How can I tap into that research and get that best potential treatment and best potential outcomes? And the way to do that is that you have to understand that you are your own best resource. You are the person who is responsible for doing the research for yourself. You are responsible for seeking key opinion leader insights and recommendations. You are responsible for looking at all of the treatment avenues available. And that's very overwhelming, because as a newly diagnosed person with cancer, it really is, when you get that diagnosis, it really is like they show in the movies, where it kind of like you get very, very focused. The surround sound, everything sounds like a Charlie Brown teacher, where it's kind of like, wah, 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 you have cancer, and you can't think of anything else. And certainly your first natural instinct is not to push back on the advice of the person that you see in front of you as being your best resource for survival. So it's important to note as a patient that while your doctor is the expert and your oncologist does have the information that they need to have to be able to cure you in the best way that they know how, there are also other options out there and that are available that you might not be learning about unless you are doing your own research, unless you're empowered to be asking questions. Ask questions of other patients on patient forums, get involved in advocacy groups, look at what the patients are saying to each other, look at what the advocacy groups are promoting, like Melanoma Research Alliance. It's an enormous resource to patients to have other people like them to say, this is what I did, this is the advice I was giving, this is what has worked for me, in a different way than maybe our doctors are talking to us about the potential treatments. So I think my very best advice for newly diagnosed patients is just do not leave any stone unturned. Go to other patients, go get a second opinion, go to key opinion leaders, see what else is being talked about on advocacy groups, see what advocacy groups like MRA are promoting and are talking about, because those are the things that we need to be keyed into that maybe we're not always being told about by our diagnosing physicians.
Thank you.
So
That's really great advice. Dr. Hong, anything to add to that?
yeah, so I'll echo Jamie on this. So, most of my patients that come to see me are not generally referred by medical oncologists or their doctors, which is very sobering, eye-opening, what have you, because most of the patients that come to me from discussions on support groups, chat rooms, Facebook support group, and it's astonishing to me the resilience, the perseverance of patients and other um, uh, around the country, really just showing their humanity of helping each other, answering questions for each other, sharing resources. And I've actually logged onto some of these support groups, and it is quite amazing to see the best of humanity, and that's really the patients afflicted with cancer. And I have to say that these support groups are a lifesaver for many. And I have to say that from a physician standpoint, I don't know if they're not sending because of conflicting interests, or they're just lack of knowledge, or just lack of education. But I have to say there's not a lot of awareness about TIL therapy, first of all. If you talk to other physicians, they don't know what it is. And it's just, that's the nature of things that are more cutting edge. People are just not aware, just not because they're bad people, they just aren't exposed to it. And so I think that I applaud patients, and I always accept to see patients no matter if they are or not a candidate, because I want to really explain to them that what they're going through and their options, because I know that they're trying. And so I have to say, what the work that you guys are doing, the MRI and Jamie's work, that it is really saving lives, because people are really going to these resources for help and finding themselves to treatment centers across the country. And I think that's vital. I think by the time we do commercials or emails or any of these things that the hospitals try, it's just not enough. It's not real time. The real time are the actual patients investing and helping others, finding sites, and really helping each other. And that to me is a testament to it's very humbling to see that it's patients helping patients getting treatment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always tell people the power of connection and the power of participation really can't be underestimated, because you just don't know what's on the other end of that inquiry or that question or that, just kind of appeal for help. There's somebody that has walked a path before you that really might be able to clear some hurdles for you. And that can save you lots of time and get you to the right place a lot faster. So I share that with a lot of people, and I encourage people that are watching this webinar to check out our melanoma exchange community. Renee just dropped a link in the notes section here. It's a place where you can go where it's melanoma patients and caregivers, and these are people that share the same or similar experiences, and they're there to offer hope and support and just listen. And sometimes when you're on this path, you feel very isolated and alone, so it can be a big help. And I also want to just kind of wrap this little part of the webinar up, because I know you all have a very special relationship. And as a cancer survivor myself, I know how important it is to find your team, because nobody can do this alone. And once you find that team of providers, you have to know that you're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And if you're not, you can, like Jamie said, you can look elsewhere. But the team aspect is important. And I would love to just hear a little bit about that doctor-patient relationship that the two of you were able to develop, because I know it's very special.
Thanks, Dana. I'm going to go first, Dr. Hung, if that's okay with you. I want to reiterate how important it was for me to, in the way that NCI made me feel, because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions as a patient. Dr. Hong alluded to the feeling of a guinea pig, or the feeling of like you're doing a last just effort, you're just contributing to other people, it's probably not going to help you. But that is not at all true for cancer clinical trials. I mean, cancer clinical trials are there to give you an actual benefit therapeutically, and they're to help cure you or improve your quality of life, depending on what the trial is meant to do. And for me, I was very emotionally caught up in my diagnosis and what people were telling me. And I had been hearing from everyone, we're going to do everything in our power to buy you 6 months. We're doing everything in our power to buy you 6 months with the baby, right? Because my child was 11 weeks old at the time. And my primary motivator was, I want to be there for him as long as I possibly can. I had a surgery at the NCI. And it was to take out the tumor that was about the size of a softball from my abdomen. And that tumor happened to be attached also to my right ovary. So they had to take my ovary plus the tumor, which is a large surgery. It was a large incision. During that surgery, I found out afterward that Dr. Hong took an extra hour plus to do my stitches in a way that in 5 to 10 years, I would not have a scar, because he believed in my survival wholeheartedly from that moment, that I was going to care what my abdomen looked like in 10 years from then, which was not something that any other doctor or physician had portrayed to me of long-term survival. It was like, let's get you past this hump. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do after 6 months. And Dr. Hong was very much like, no, we're going to cure this woman. She's going to care what her abdomen scar looks like in 10 years. And he took an extra hour plus to make the tiniest incisions so that it would not have any scar 10 years later. And I have no scar. It's been 14 years. I have no scar from that crazy surgery because of the extra time that Dr. Hong took, because he saw me as a person. He didn't see me as a data point. He didn't see me as a patient. He saw me as a person, as a mother, as a person that exists in this world who might have psychological feelings about a scar 10 years down the line, even though he was realistically doing everything that he could every day to save my life. And this was a cosmetic issue. And still, it was important enough to him to feel that it was important enough to me to take the extra time to do that for me because he saw me as a full person and not as a patient or a data point. And that level of investment in my therapy, in my cure, in my treatment, I think really is what emotionally gave me the extra edge to be able to deal with everything that had to be dealt with during that tumultuous time in my diagnosis, in my disease state, in my treatment, and everything else. I could hold on to those things. I could hold on to Dr. Hong saying, "No, I took an extra hour because you're going to live, because it's important to me, because it's going to be important to you in 10 years, even though you don't know it yet. It's going to be." And it is, and it was, and it's perfect. And that is the relationship that we started with, and that is why our relationship continues today, 14 years later, in a different institution and in a different standpoint.
That's really nice. Thank you for sharing all of that, Dr. Hong. Anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, so you know, when Jamie was admitted to NCI, I remember she had this pregnancy pillow, and I didn't know what that was at the time. And just so you know, everyone knows I have a pregnancy pillow in my bedroom as we speak. That's from Jamie from 2011 that I learned. So, um, you know, we impact people and patients impact us equally the same. And you know, when I think about like, you know, this whole process, you know, I had a pretty tragic loss of my father when I was younger, and you know, back at the time, I didn't really understand why that happened. And I pray, and you know, I'm just like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And when I look back now, whenever a patient or someone in life faces a tragedy, I think it actually helps you look back and relate to another human being. So I was in the patient side, I was in the family side. So I actually understood what fear, anxiety the patients may be feeling at this time when I meet them. So I actually felt like it was a calling to help others from that. And whenever I meet a patient, I try to really go back to how I felt and really be there for the patient and try everything in my power to do it. And the thing that, you know, motivates me and what gets me up is, you know, every person I want to help. And if I can't help them, it makes me upset, angry, frustrated, what have you. And that actually drives me to do more research, to look for ways to overcome why didn't this patient respond? What else can we try? And it's this desire to really help others, which I think is really just a nice, it's actually a blessing and a calling that I think I'm really thankful for, that I have the ability to help others. But I think it really stems from a tragic beginning, which I think everyone that's afflicted with cancer is a tragedy because you know you feel a certain way, but you also have to remember that you're being afflicted with cancer can be a blessing, a light, of hope to someone else. And you can turn something really beautiful from something really dark and tragic. So I think this whole cancer and living and you know this relationship we have with another human being is I don't really know. Maybe when I die, maybe I'll ask God why we have cancer. But I think when we see how others help others afflicted and why we do it for, you know, for the well-being of another human being, that's really a beautiful thing to see every day. And I'm just glad to be part of it.
Thank you for sharing. It takes a lot of humility to do that for both of you. So we appreciate that very much. We are nearing the time where I would like to address some of the questions that came in through the webinar registration and then see if there are any from people that are live with us right now. So Renee, would you like to tee up any questions, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So a question that we actually got several times through the registration, and Dr. Hong, you did touch on this with the uveal melanoma and the difficulties applying this therapy to it, but we had a lot of questions about the other rare subtypes of acral and mucosal melanoma and how TIL therapy works or doesn't work in those specific types of melanoma.
Right. So right now, those acral melanoma and mucosal melanoma doesn't seem to have a signal there. And if you think about the etiology, how cutaneous melanoma starts, a lot of it starts from a lot of UV damage that cause DNA double strand breaks and causes a lot of mutations to occur. So there's a lot of epitopes or targets that form from foreign protein being formed. And same thing with lung cancer and head and neck. And so there's other targets that makes a non-self target for the immune system to recognize. And unfortunately right now, the acral and the mucosal melanoma and ocular do not have the same etiology of damage from the UV that causes a lot of foreign proteins to be made. Having said that, we are treating patients with this histotripsy, which is a non-invasive ultrasound ablation tool. A lot of times these types of melanoma go to the liver, and so the liver still evades the immune system. So when you actually start melting the liver metastases with the ultrasound in a non-thermal way, it actually allows the neoantigens that are inside the cells to be released and allows the body to kind of surveillance as it digests that lysate to have some immune priming effect. And there's been cases of ocular melanoma to the liver that have actually had an immune priming from this strategy. And that's kind of the reason why I got that technology for patients who are not responding to the traditional TIL therapy as well. So, but if you kind of think about how the melanoma starts, it's from UV damage and cigarettes for smoking and lung cancer and HPV for head and neck. So a lot of these cancers there's a driver for the foreign proteins, which makes it more immunogenic. The rest of the cancers that are less immunogenic, that is the ongoing research about how to prime it. So non-invasive histotripsy, radioablation, vaccine injection in combination with immunotherapy. Another example of colon cancer going to the liver, why can't we do TIL? It's the same reason. There's not a lot of tumor targets. So the strategy that we're trying to do is trying to generate TIL by actually ablating these colorectal liver mets with that histotripsy ultrasound technology and actually extracting that tumor after it's been ablated to get the more immune stimulation into it. It's kind of like akin to when you go fishing if you're a fisherman, right? Think of TIL harvest as a fishing. You take a big net and there's not a lot of fish. What do? You chum the water. If you chum the water, a lot of the fish come into the chum, and that's when you catch the net. And so the same idea of priming is that you want to chum the water before you harvest the tumor to get higher T cell infiltration, because the T cells that you get from the surgical harvest is the cells that are going to be replicated and divided and given back to you. So it all starts from what was in that original tumor at the time of harvest. So right now, at this point in time, the acral and mucosal and ocular are not historically responding, but as I alluded to before, Dr. Udit Kamula at the University of Pittsburgh had demonstrated a clear response now to ocular uveal melanoma. So there is a breakthrough happening in that, and it's only a matter of time before acral and mucosal melanoma will start to become effective as well. So I say not right now, but as research goes on, this will surely be a thing.
Awesome. Thank you. And that hope is so important. And I know for a fact, I'm not going to say any names, but I know we have some participants, mucosal participants, who are TIL success stories on this webinar. So to them, to hear that the research is still ongoing and it's important to figure out, those differentiating factors, it's really important to them. And you actually brought up something. I have one more question from actually anonymous chat question that kind of segues from a part of your answer. During the TIL process, how large does a tumor have to be to isolate the TILs? And can you be able to isolate it from any metastatic site in the body, or are there certain spots that are better than others?
Right. So thank you. That's a great question. So for the TIL therapy to be effective, you have to have one lesion that you can target to see the assessment response. And then the one that you're going to harvest, the minimum tumor harvest need is 1.5 centimeters. And that's in a three-dimensional size, like a circumferential dimension of 1.5 centimeter. Right now, historically at the NCI, it was thought that, the lymph nodes were the generally more preferred, that there's been historically less efficacy from the lung and the GI tract. However, as the volume of TIL therapy has really expanded in the post-NCI experience, we have come to know that it really doesn't matter where the tumor is harvested, as long as it's adequate. So one caveat to that is, harvesting a TIL site from a place that has been previously irradiated or treated with, let's say, injections or any other thermal strategies generally are not going to yield a high percentage of cell therapy. But as long as, the operative surgeon understands how TIL works and knows that the harvest site is going to be someplace that's going to yield a good response, 1.5 centimeter in aggregate size is what you need. Doesn't have to be one lesion that's 1.5, but it can be aggregate of 1.5 centimeters.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the registration, Renee?
I do, but I want to toss it to the group just to see if
Okay,
anyone in
great.
here wants to come on with any questions, but I do have one more. So no pressure, but if anybody who's on the call right now wants to come off mute and ask a question of Jamie or Dr. Hong, you are more than welcome.
Yeah. Would it be helpful for me to kind of give like a patient understanding of what it's like to experience TIL?
Sure.
Certainly.
Yeah. So as Dr. Hung said, there's a tumor extraction, right, where they take part of one of your tumors because theoretically all the white blood cells in that tumor were lymphocytes that understood that melanoma was a foreign body and they stumbled upon it and were trying to kill it. So what TIL does is harvest the power of those lymphocytes within your own body, who are the cells that understand that melanoma is cancer, right? Because melanoma is a cancer that doesn't respond to chemotherapy. It doesn't respond, but it is one of the cancers that your body can recognize as a foreign substance, which is the problem with treating cancer in general, right? It's your body doesn't understand that cancerous cells are foreign bodies that they need to attack because they're generated from your own cells. So melanoma is a kind of cancer that your body can say this is a foreign substance, we're gonna attack it. So the first part of TIL is extracting part of an existing tumor to take out all of the lymphocytes that are within that tumor. And Dr. Hunt, you keep me honest here if I'm not explaining the science correctly, but from a layperson's understanding. And so they're extracting all the lymphocytes that are found within that tumor because those are theoretically trainer cells that can train the rest of your immune system to find and fight cancer. And so they extract those cells in the lab, they replicate them by the billions in the lab, and then that process takes several weeks. I think in Iovance it takes 4 weeks. Ish, and depending on the patient and depending on the cells, but 4 weeks ish to grow this new cellular strand, because what the goal is to replace your current immune system with all of these fighter cells that have been grown in the lab. And so they extract the tumor, grow the cells by the billions in the lab, and then your experience as a patient is several weeks to a month inpatient in the hospital, where the first part of that is high dose chemotherapy to kill your current immune system, not to fight the cancer, but to kill your current immune system. And so it brings your cell count all the way down to 0 after 5 to 7 days. And when that happens, when you're completely neutropenic, when you have no immune system to respond to anything else, they administer the new cells that they have made in the lab as your new army of fighter cells, basically. So that's basically a transfusion. It just comes in an IV bag. It's very anticlimactic, actually. I expected a parade and like all kinds of stuff when my new cells were brought in. But it's just a bag that hangs on your IV. They put it in they transfuse you with the new cells. And then that's your new immune system, basically. And then you wait in the hospital for your cell counts to come back up. And along the way, you might need to do things like have shots that increase your red blood cell count. You might need blood infusions, those kind of things, to help your body come back up to normal stasis for immune system function. But when it does, you now, instead of your normal immune system, you now have this whole immune system that was fabricated in the lab to be a fighter cells and a fighter immune system that can find melanoma and attack it. And then it kind of takes it on from that point on. So for example, I was 1 month in the hospital at NCI. I had all these things, the high dose chemotherapy. I went down to 0 cell count. I had the new cells administered. And then it was over the course of the next year that the new immune system was able to attack all the tumor and bring it down to no evidence of disease. Because when I started TIL, I had more than 40 tumors all throughout my body, subcutaneous, some in my liver, some in my pancreas, some subcutaneous, everywhere, right? More than 40 tumors. And TIL was after I received the treatment, it was, several months, a year until my immune system had taken over, my new immune system that was built in the lab for me, take over and be able to fight all of the cancer and kill it and reduce it to nothing. So it was the 1 month treatment, and then there's not more treatment. You just wait. You wait for the treatment to take effect. And all the side effects that you experience are kind of within that 1 month in the hospital. So you don't have long-term side effects of feeling badly or being sick or not having your energy that you would with traditional cancer treatment. So it is also a very different kind of treatment in that respect, because your side effects are limited to that 1 month or 3 weeks or whatever point that you're in the hospital getting your new immune system. And you feel like maybe not great for those 3 weeks. It wasn't the most horrible that I've ever felt, but you're ill, you're in the hospital, but it's limited to that time that you're in the hospital, and then you come out of the hospital and pretty much resume your normal life, and wait for your new immune system to take over and to start killing everything, and then you're cured. Right, we're not, of course, right. I'm not supposed to say that. Not everybody is cured. That's not, of course, that's not what we're trying to put out there about TIL. It is a treatment like any other, but that is the goal of the treatment and how it works.
That is a great overview. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else in the audience have a question or want to react to anything? We'd love to hear from you. Okay, any closing comments from Jamie or Dr. Hong?
Well, I want to thank everyone and Jamie for this webinar, and Dana for really hosting this, and Renee. I think it's really helpful for patients to understand that these treatments are only available because patients like Jamie and others have allowed us to advance medicine and help others. And I really think that we really generally do have patients' best interest at heart. Any investigator must have equipoise, meaning that they truly must believe in the treatment that they are providing. Otherwise, it is actually unethical. And so whenever patients ask me, what would you do if it's your mother? And I would tell them exactly the same thing. And I truly believe that, and I know a lot of my good colleagues do as well throughout the country. So I just thank everyone for their courage and their humanity and helping others really throughout this process. I can't imagine what it's like to be in people's shoes on the other side, but I really truly thank the patients that have gone through this.
Thank you, Dr. Hong. Well, it's time to wrap up. We are so grateful to our audience, our speakers, Dr. Hong and Jamie, and to Iovance for their partnership, allowing us to educate patients and caregivers in a safe and interactive setting. Remember, a recording of this webinar will be available soon on our site. We are so grateful for all of you. Thank you for joining, and watch for future webinars.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.